I remember like my eyes were closed and I just saw these colors, and then I saw like the river, but my eyes were still closed, and then more colors. And then I literally heard this voice kind of just say, "You're the universe pretending to be human. Stop pretending."
Thanks so much for taking the time to be here with me today and talk about this because it's a really interesting subject matter.
Absolutely. I love nerding out about this stuff, so thank you for having me.
For sure. So, can you just tell me a bit about why you chose psychology and why you were drawn to this particular subject of psychedelic use in therapy?
So I chose psychology because I was an addict for about 10 years. And then once I left it, I kind of had this had this question of like, I suffered for 10 years with no help or no knowledge or education about what else is out there, you know? And then once I stepped out of the bounds of like my Christian beliefs and all of that, kind of found something that did work, which was the White Raven Center, which, we've talked about in the past, or just rapid transformation therapy, the work that you do with your clients and things like that. And that's shifted things. So in my head, I was going, okay, well, if all of this is out there, if all these modalities of therapy are out there and they're working, and the only thing that keeps them on the outside is scientific research, then what if we just brought scientific research to those places instead of being afraid of that, and then give people more of a shot to find freedom from their addictions and experience something different without having to go through that 10 years of just or more. I mean, people go through like 50 years of addiction before they actually have some sort of change, you know? And that's what led me to the White Raven Center, where I did like a research project with them, with Marianne Roland for a little while until life kind of threw me in for a loop. But the summer before my junior year, fall semester of college in undergrad, I took mushrooms for the very first time with a friend of mine who we've been talking about it since like high school. So like we were excited, but we were really, really nervous. At that point in my life, I've already been meditating and I've already been like doing the work for like 4 years. So whenever I first experienced a psychedelic trip, it felt more familiar than anything else. And so after noticing that and noticing all these other sort of stories of people who have tried, psychedelics, and they've experienced healing or just a shift of consciousness of how they thought about their life. And that first mushroom trip definitely changed changed the relationship I had with my ego, but also changed the way that I viewed what was going on in my life at the time. So that was kind of what led me to become interested. So whenever the very next semester started, that fall semester of junior year, we had to write a literature review. And as soon as he said literature review, I was like, psychedelics, that's it. I'm gonna do it. Like nothing's stopping me. I'm gonna do it. But
Love
yeah, that's kind of how I got to the decision to write the paper from. Yeah.
That's cool. And you said that psilocybin kind of changed your relationship with your ego. Can you expand on that?
Yeah, so before I took psychedelics, it was hard to see where I began. Like when I say I, I'm talking about like the self, right? The spirit inside of us, right? Or soul, right? And where the ego began. It was really hard to see those two things because, I was 19, 20 at the time, I was just getting into adulthood. My ego wasn't even fully developed, so it was really hard to see the difference between the two. And so I always just, you know, after leaving the church, which was very restrictive, once I left it, which was the space I was in when I first took psychedelics, once I left it, I basically gave my ego full reign. Like, do whatever you want. Like, what do you want to do? You want to do that? Go, let's go do it. Like, no more inhibitions or anything like that, which looking back, I think was important for a time because I was so, restricted. And that's why I see this whole thing like people who are Pentecostal, that they left the church and now they're wild, right? They are just out there, right? I guess their let loose ego phase lasted a lot longer than mine, but like it was like that for a time. And during that time, I just let my ego do whatever. The lines between me and my ego started to blur. And so when I took psilocybin, the first thing it showed me, I remember this one moment I had on that first trip. It was like maybe 2 hours in, and I'm sitting there on the chair, closing my eyes with this river in front of me. And I asked, the universe that question that everyone wants to ask whenever they're on mushrooms or something, right? What, like, who am I? You know?
Mhm.
Um, and I remember like my eyes were closed and I just saw these colors, and then I saw like the river, but my eyes were still closed, and then more colors. And then I literally heard this voice kind of just say, "You're the universe pretending to be human. Stop pretending." And then it was like I felt like this kind of happened. And then my ego was just like, no, 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 what are we doing here? Like, we're all good here. You don't have. And then I was sitting back watching him do this whole thing. And I'm like, oh, holy shit. I literally in my mind's eye remember seeing like this silhouette of me and stars just inside of me. It was the most beautiful thing ever. And then I realized there's something beyond the name Nikhil. There's something beyond his likes, dislikes, and dreams and all that stuff. There's something quiet about beyond that, that silent witness that Deepak Chopra would talk about. But yeah, that's kind of what I mean, like the relationship with my ego after that. I was able to see it a lot more clearly and how it hijacked my thought processes a lot of the time. And it was a source of a lot of my overthinking. So that was very helpful to notice.
What a cool experience.
Yeah, there was wilder things that happened on that trip. And then
Oh my God.
I looked at my friend, right? And he was sitting like perpendicular to me, right? I was sitting here, he was sitting right kind of on my right side.
Yeah.
And I looked at his face and he was stared directly at me, but we weren't talking because we were both at like the peak of the trip, right? And I look at his face, and all of a sudden his face turns into this little baby face, like him as a baby, right? And I was like, what the? And then I thought in my head, like, what if I see him get really, really old, like see his older side? Like I just thought it in my head. And then all of a sudden his face like morphed into this old man. It was like an old man version of him. I was like, what the heck? Time really isn't linear, it's circular. Yeah. I was learning all of these things that I'd never really understood or noticed before.
That's wild, hey. There's so much going on beyond what we can see with our physical eyes and beyond this physical world.
Mm.
Actually, I had a very similar experience after my Kundalini awakening where I had that break too from my ego. And I remember watching myself. It was so strange because this one day sticks in my memory. I was watching myself speak to somebody in just like, it was almost like I was on autopilot, just talking. Meanwhile, I was also observing myself talking all this crap. And I was just like, do you believe that? Like, what is this? What are you just like? What's
Yeah.
happening? Like, why are we saying these things? Like, what is this? Where does this come from? And I could actually see kind of where all this babbling stemmed from and the belief systems. It was so wild. But that's the thing, like we're not really taught that there is something beyond the mind and
Yeah.
beyond that constant train of thought. And it wasn't until I really started committing to my meditation practice that the awakening happened. But I really started to realize that I was not the thoughts.
Mhm.
I was not that ticker tape. It was like a ticker tape, it just never shut off.
It's kind of when I was on my walk and I just watched my ego earlier just go, right? It was really, really like I was proud of myself when I realized just how much I didn't participate in it. It kind of just happened and then it went away. And then the next thought came and it went away. And I was watching it like traffic. And it was such an empowering, I guess, space because in the past, you and I both know how we were. Like it was just traffic came, you got in the traffic, you went on a ride, a wild ride of anxiety and depression, and then you come back the next one. But
Totally.
but now it seems like okay, we can just watch this go. It's just messengers of the universe going through.
And then, yeah, you do start to just be in more of that liminal space, kind of more peaceful place. And you can just, yeah, it is like traffic, just watching the cars go by, watching the thoughts go by. You can
Yeah.
choose to get on there. You know
Yeah,
where it's going.
yeah.
Do you really want to?
Yeah, exactly. It's like we've seen this taxi before. He's kind of
Yeah.
shaky. He robbed me last time. I'd be an idiot if I went into it this time.
Right.
Yeah, maybe that's what the world needs right now. We need to show the world that it's just like traffic. Your thoughts are traffic. You decide what car you get into, and don't be an idiot about what car you get into.
Right.
If you wouldn't get into the car in real life, don't get into the car in your head. There you go.
Oh
Danger,
man, I
danger.
love that.
You got to know when to say stranger danger. All right.
Yeah. Resist the candy.
Yeah, exactly. Sometimes they have candy.
hmm
Some
Sometimes it looks like the shiniest ice cream truck. Don't get in
yeah,
it.
don't get it. We could pull this analogy apart a million different ways, honestly.
But that is a
So,
brilliant analogy. I know, I'm like, oh, and I had some spicy curry before this too, so I was already heated
I
up.
did too.
Did you?
Less of a surprise that I did, but I welcome to every day of my entire life. And this is a very different experience than what we were talking about earlier. But like, whenever I'm eating sweet potato, for some reason, sweet potato is like my Popeye spinach for some reason. Every time I
Really?
eat sweet potato, it literally feels like my field is going like it's weird. Like whenever I stopped eating curry or any Indian food for like a month and I just ate sweet potato, chicken, and broccoli, I have never been more creative, happy, and like connected with just every space I was in. It became so sensitive that like my friends, this was back when I lived in Austin. My friends wanted to go to a one of the clubs out there on East 6th Street, right? And
Mhm.
I walked into the bar and I was stone cold sober. And and it literally felt like everyone had little hammers and they were like pounding at my face, at like my head, and everything. That's what their energy felt like. And I was like, oh, this is why people get fucked up when they go into these places because they can't handle the hammers, you know?
That's why I don't go to the club anymore. But you know what? It makes sense that you would feel that way when you're eating lots of sweet potato because it's
Mhm.
orange, right? Same as the sacral chakra.
Yes, that's what I was thinking. Yeah.
And that's like the seat of your creativity, your creative power. And you actually said that you were more creative when you're eating
Yeah.
lots of sweet potato, right?
Yeah. Like there was a joke that took me 3 years to write. It finished whenever I did that sober January and I was just eating sweet potato. After, failing at writing this joke for 3 years, it finally just came together. And I'm still telling that joke like a year or two later.
Wow.
It really clicked a lot of things into space. I think I might do that for this semester. Just because like you can get in a rhythm of it. And I'll put like spicy mayo on it just to give it a little more of a special taste so it doesn't taste like the same damn thing every day.
Yeah.
But you can get in a rhythm of just eating the same exact thing every day, and you can trick your brain into thinking that it's the best thing every day, you know? Like that's a very low sodium meal. And I remember going out and, for one night, for one Friday night, I wanted to eat something else, right? I ate this like spicy chicken sandwich, right, with a lot of sodium in it. Probably what I was eating every day was probably like a 16th of how much salt was in that. I took a bite out of it. The feeling I felt in my body felt no different than if I had just smoked all the weed in the world. Like
Mhm.
it felt like an actual high. That's the effect like salt has on us. And I wonder how like salt affects the energetic system because I know that we have electrolytes and we need electrolytes, but I feel like there are maybe certain types of salts that may be built more beneficial than others. I don't know. What are your thoughts on
Totally. Totally. And there's so many different types of electrolytes, right? Like you've got
magnesium?
potassium, magnesium, and you do have your sodium chloride, but but there
Mhm.
are different classes of salts for sure. And your classic iodized salt is actually not that great for you.
Yeah.
Like it's tasty, but I mean, it's almost like anything. You need these things, but if you have too much, then I can imagine because really the electrolytes are what
Send the
like are
electrical signals. Yeah.
exactly. So if you have too much mineralization, it would probably make it really hard for those synapses to fire
Or
properly.
maybe they fire too much. That's
That
another.
could be too.
Yeah, because what I'm thinking is we have sodium and potassium channels in our neurons, right? And so those sodium, potassium, it's called a concentration gradient, right? You have a certain amount outside and inside of the neuron cell. And whenever action potentials happen, whenever they fire, there's some channels that open to let some sodium, potassium in on both ends, and then that creates the charge of electricity that fires. Is because like you know how salt water is a conductor? Like you can
Yeah,
put two metal poles in it and then they'll conduct you pass the electricity through.
yeah.
It might be the same thing, but I think you're right. I think whenever there's too much or too less, I know whenever there's too less, you're probably going to have less sodium to have those, those neurons fire. But if you have too much of it, I don't know for sure, but I'm guessing too much activity might be a bad thing for that's my scientific analysis. It might be a bad thing.
Yeah. Do you think that might be why there's seems to be so much more, like maybe not the only reason, but a contributing factor to why there's so much more anxiety these days?
Maybe it might
Like,
be an overactivity of synaptic firing and things like that. Yeah.
yeah. Like I know
Syn
there's a lot of other things too, our technology, less
yeah.
connection to nature,
A lot of
less,
things that are killing
yeah.
us. Yeah. Yeah, no, you're right. That might be why. Because I think whenever I was at that, that equilibrium with my diet, I wasn't drinking any alcohol. I wasn't doing any drugs. I wasn't even drinking caffeine. So like my synaptic levels were just kind of stable. And so I think whenever I ate that burger, I went, "Phew," and then there was some anxiety, I guess I would feel around there. But it's like that rush, that kind of, when you feel like you're shivering, but it's not cold. I
Yeah.
think I think that might those panic attack like symptoms might just be. I mean, whenever you get stressed, what happens? Your sugar levels go up, right? And you need to get some sugar or salt or electrolytes in your system in a certain amount to calm yourself down. But if your salt levels, I'm just extrapolating this in my head, but if your salt levels are too high, you'd have more synaptic firing, which means that your brain would just fire really, really fast, more than you can comprehend it going. But again, I'm not gonna pretend to be an expert on the subject at all, but yeah, no, it makes sense just by what we know about electrolytes and why we need them. I mean, I drink so much electrolytes in the sun, and whenever I feel like my electrolytes are low, I'm literally moving slowly. Like my
Same.
body is moving slowly. So it's like those synapses aren't firing as well. And I think when you drink the electrolytes and all that stuff, you can feel more yourself and all of that. But
That makes sense.
it's an
Well, and it
interesting
also,
question. Yeah.
yeah, well, and it also makes sense too that you would have an anxious response because like it's been proven that when you're stressed, your body actually purges electrolytes.
Yeah.
So if you have too many, then it makes sense that the body would make you stressed so that you purge the excess.
hmm Yeah. Yeah. It might be like a cat shaking off the anxiety after a shower. It's like you gave
Yeah,
people this and now it's time to reach equilibrium.
never thought of that before.
I've never asked that question either. I might actually do a little bit of digging later about that. I'll let you know. I'll let you know what I find.
Okay.
Because this is in my wheelhouse of neurons and neuroscience and things like that. So I feel like there's something out there on that because they have said that whenever you're depressed, you go after one of two things. You go after sweets or salty foods, right? Have you heard this before?
I
So,
have.
so I wonder why there's those two, like why people fall into one of those two sort of categories, you know? I don't know why it wouldn't just be salts. Like, why wouldn't people, when they're anxious, just go for salts? Or what does sugar do in your body that's salt doesn't do, you know?
Might be time for
Like,
another research paper.
yeah, yeah. On the next literature review by Nikhil Pili, we're
Yeah.
gonna be talking about salt and why you like McDonald's too much.
It's just an interesting conversation, and just the way that, eating certain foods can affect your energy and your mood.
Yeah,
And it kind of makes sense that there's record numbers of depression too. And you think about how much processed food we're eating that's just like gray, like salty, fatty, gray. There's no color to it. Like
yeah.
you look at McDonald's, everything's kind of like
It's bleak. Yeah,
it's bleak.
yeah.
Oh, that just reminded me of something that you said last time that we talked
Hmm.
that I thought was just so fascinating. You mentioned, and I hope that I caught it right, you
Hmm.
mentioned that when people are depressed, the world actually literally looks
Oh
darker to
yeah.
them.
Yeah, so I guess I'll just start from the beginning on that because that is a really interesting concept. Whenever
Yeah.
I was doing that literature review, I wanted to know if schizophrenic hallucinations are the same as a hallucinatory experience by a psychedelic. More specifically, the classic psychedelics like LSD, DMT, and psilocybin, right? So I asked my chairman at the time, and she did her dissertation at University of Oregon, and they have a huge neuroscience program over there. She did her dissertation on serotonin in the body, and she told me that we have serotonin everywhere. We have serotonin in our hands, our feet, our in our eyes, and they're connected to our photoreceptors. And so, whenever people are depressed, i.e., low serotonin, whenever they say that things just feel a little bit more bleak or darker, they literally mean it's darker because their photoreceptors are taking in less light because the less serotonin you have, the less light those photoreceptors want to take in. So, like, everything will just be as it is, just a little dimmer. That's why whenever you come out of a process, like a really deep process, where you maybe did some really, really deep internal emotional surgery on yourself, and you get out of it maybe an hour or two later, we've all had those experiences, and everything in the room, if the lights are on, just seem a tiny bit too much. Everything just seems brighter. And I think that has something to do with those serotonin levels changing, you know? Now, here's another interesting kind of thing that connects. Whenever you take psychedelics, they primarily operate on your serotonin system, more specifically 5-HT1A, 2A, and 2C receptors. They're subtypes of this one serotonin receptor. And so whenever you take psychedelics, right? Whenever you take something like, let's say LSD, whenever you take LSD, it literally will make your serotonergic system operate at a more higher functioning way. So it increases activity in those receptors. So serotonin in the body, those levels are increasing. That activity is increasing. Therefore, if you were to look at the sun or go outside after being inside for a very long time, ask anyone. It's just super bright. It takes so much to adjust because your pupils are incredibly dilated because of the serotonin that's rushing in through your system. The same thing, I've never tried MDMA, but all of my friends who have told me about that have told me that it's just things are bright. If you're inside and you go outside, things are really, really bright. Your pupils are really, really dilated. I think it all comes back to that serotonin thing of serotonin, whenever it raises its activity in the system, your eyes will take in more light and your body and your emotions will be different, you know. And things like MDMA is literally just all of your serotonin in your body just dumping. And so that's why people feel very sensory or very happy, very lovey-dovey. It's because of that activity raising in the serotonin system.
Interesting. So when you say that serotonin's dumping, what's happening?
So if I'm remembering this correctly, it operates, I think MDMA operates a lot like cocaine does for dopamine. The way that cocaine works in the synapse, right, is you have the the presynaptic memory and then you have the postsynaptic memory, right? And you have that little space where all the neurotransmitters, which are just chemical signals that are passed through whenever you have like neural firing, right? So for cocaine, what happens is you have the you have the cocaine coming into the system, and then what it does is it blocks the reuptake of dopamine in your system. You can think of the reuptake process as like a recycling bin. So once the neurotransmitter of dopamine is used, it just goes whoop, right back into this and goes back to where it can recycle itself, right? Now,
Okay.
what cocaine will do is it'll block that process. And so dopamine's being released into the synapse, but the brain's going, we're running out of dopamine, let's make more. And so it makes more and keeps dumping it into the synapse and without any recycling. So what happens the next day after a cocaine bender? You feel depressed. You feel like killing yourself because you literally have no dopamine in your system. It's probably
Wow.
hard to move too because dopamine helps us with movement and things like that. With serotonin, with MDMA, I think, don't quote me on this, I think it's the same sort of thing where the reuptake of serotonin instead of dopamine is blocked. So when that reuptake's blocked, what does it tell the brain? We're running out of serotonin. Send in the troops, And so all of the serotonin in the system just goes into the synapse, and then that happens for, I believe, like 4 hours or so, and then you're just depressed. You have no serotonin in your system for, I believe, it's like 5 days till your body can, depending on what you eat. If you eat shitty food, you're not gonna get any serotonin. If you eat
Right.
really, really good food that's very nutritious, you're gonna get the vitamins you need to build up those serotonin neurotransmitters again.
This is
Okay.
really fascinating stuff.
Yeah. It's why I fell in love with psychology in the first place. I found
Yeah.
out what alcohol does to the brain too. So whenever you drink alcohol, you increase the inhibitory neurotransmitter of GABA. You increase that, so your body, it's the central nervous system just slows down a tiny bit as much as you drink. I mean, if you can literally slow yourself down and send so much GABA into your system to where you will die, like, or you'll reach a
Wow. Or
comatose
you
state
black out.
or you black out. Yeah. And that mixed with like the sugar and all of that and different alcoholic beverages and things like that. That's why you see people black out and they'll like go do something crazy. They'll go on a side quest or something. It's
Yeah.
parts of their body are still awake, but they're not conscious of any of it because they've slowed down their parts of their brain that stores memory or anything like that. There's so many more things that alcohol does. What I said was very reductive of the complexity of what it actually does. That's why, you can't quit cold turkey if you're too far gone, or if you do, you'll experience certain like shakes and withdrawal symptoms and things like that. Same thing with cocaine or any other opiates. That's something I will never touch
Yeah.
because that is the heroin and things like that damages your system in ways that like not even ecstasy will get close to doing. One time I was watching this TV show, this documentary on heroin addicts, right? And I might have mentioned this to you, but like we fell asleep, right? We woke up the next morning and we literally experienced a hangover, like an emotional hangover.
Wow.
Yeah, like we were watching it the night before, like, it's just a documentary. It doesn't matter. We can just watch it. It'll be fine. It's interesting. And then went to bed, had a weird nightmare, woke up in the morning sweaty and like feeling like I was hungover. Have you ever
It's
had that happen to you? Like a
yeah,
like
like
emotional hangover by watching something?
100%. Like I've always been really sensitive. But yeah, no, definitely I've had emotional hangovers from watching stuff. Like I have a hard time watching violent stuff for that reason. Or else like I have to watch something positive before I go to bed. If I do watch something that's really heavy, then I need to kind of
Watch
lift my
SpongeBob.
mood.
Yeah,
Watch
there.
yeah, watch SpongeBob or something before I go to bed. Otherwise, yeah, I'll have all kinds of crazy nightmares and
I'm not a fan of horror movies, I'm sure.
no.
No.
No, absolutely not. I can't. It just like fries my whole
Yeah.
nervous system. And then I have weird
Yeah.
nightmares, and then I'm thinking about it, and no, I can't do the horror movies.
Yeah, I changed my relationship with horror movies after my mentor Seth. Shout out to Seth wherever he's at.
Yeah.
But Seth and I were I was working with him, and this one time told me to take out my phone and pull up the trailer to the Nun movie. Like you've heard the Nun movie, right? The
Oh, that creepy one.
yeah, with
Oh, even the trailer wigged me out, man.
yeah. But you can feel that in your body, right? And so
Yeah.
like we were watching it, and he's like, I want you to just focus on how your body changes, right? Because we went from like integrating a younger part of me and this blissful, happy sort of center. And then he was like, all right, time to bring out the nun, right? Just so he can show me how drastically you can sense these changes. And so I'm watching it along with him. And at the very end of it, I can literally, especially that one scene where it's like the human nun and then it just like the lights turn off and it's like the skeleton nun or whatever. I
Yeah.
felt like energy just drop. And I can feel it now, even just talking about it. What happens is you have resonance, right? Your body constantly wants to resonate with things. And our bodies contain so many different vibrations. You know, we have our happy thoughts or sad thoughts or parts of us that were traumatized, parts of us that were loved and excited in some moments and it got trapped in our bodies, right? And so whenever I was watching that, it resonated with these lower vibrational charges inside of me. And then right after that, he's like, okay, now put Zootopia. And so he pulled up the Zootopia trailer, and I was like, wow, we could literally feel the shift from that really low to that really high. I started doing this with music after that session, right? I would find a really sad song by like Band of Horses or something like that. I was on a road trip. I was very bored, right? So I put in my AirPods. I took a deep breath so I can like kind of center myself. Um, kind of like smelling a cup of coffee beans before you smell another perfume. You know, you got to like
Yeah,
reset
yeah.
your palate. So I was breathing to reset everything, right? And then I turned on the song and I turned my attention to it. And the trick I like to do is I'll focus on my right ear, feel that it's there, focus on my left ear, and then I'll focus on the thing because like I don't know,
Mm.
it's just a trick that's worked for me. And so like I put my attention on the song, and I felt like my body drop into it. All these sad memories, like, oh, your dad said that thing when you were five, and all this stuff, right? And then I like went down to like a really happy song like Electric Love. And then I just interrupted the song. I didn't wait till it was done. I interrupted the song and I felt like these chills like all throughout my entire body. And I'm like, oh, that's what we're feeling. Whenever you feel chills from listening to a song, it's because there is this shift of energy that you experience, this drastic shift of vibration. Because if I faded them in and out, there's likely I'll not feel that. But since it was so sudden, I went from like this vibration to poof, you know, just really quick. And you feel that in your body. You feel the change of resonance, and it's like I don't know. It was so interesting. And then I just did that for the rest of the 4 hour drive. I was just feeling different things. And then I started like mapping on my little notepad, like, okay, this song is like a 500 hertz. This song's like 1,000 hertz. But you can really, like, the more you practice that, the more you can definitely train your body to feel, you know, probably some of the things that you and I feel whenever we just enter into a space because we've been doing this a while. So, like, we're a lot more tuned to those middle spaces.
Yeah, and it's
It,
really interesting, yeah, training yourself to pick up on the subtle energies like that. And then yeah, you go into a crowd and you can feel it when you get near somebody. You can feel their energy. You can feel how your body reacts to it. So just being aware of that and experimenting with it, see how you feel around different people at different times and when you're listening to different things. Like just well, it's on the internet all the time. Like be aware of what you're consuming, and it's not just the food, it's the vibrations, it's the
content.
sounds, it's the lights, all of it.
Yeah, and I'm noticing how, like, whenever I talk to certain people, I will acclimate to their energy, you know, because I think that's the caretaker part of me. I mean, sometimes I've gotten to the point where I can dictate the energy and they have to follow. A lot of the times that's when I'm on stage doing comedy. Like I
Right.
dictate the laughter and the subject and the energy, and you guys have to meet me there. Whereas before, when I started, it was more so like I have to match their energy. I have to meet them where they're at. And it never worked. I bombed so much, but like there was that shift. But at work, right? My boss, by the way, the business I work for is just like a father and two kids, right? And the son and the daughter, they're very different, right? The son is a very matter of fact atheist, like peer-reviewed studies or it doesn't exist, right? And so like we'll our conversations, like I'll say something that I want him to kind of just I guess I want him to just start a conversation about, and he'll just go, I agree. And then just move on. And it's very much like a like a matter he's a very matter of fact person. And I'll feel myself go into like a state of being where I'm like only saying things that are needed to be said rather than just being like my goofy self just cracking jokes at everything, right? Now we had this new coworker that came in, and he's really goofy. He's not very matter of fact at all. And the three of us, we went out to go do some pulls, and all of a sudden, this part of me came out where I was just joking around because he was there. Like you see how I was resonating with his humor and all that, and he told so many jokes. But like since my boss wasn't, it didn't feel safe to, you know, do that. But yeah, in a similar sense, I feel like when we meet people, we it brings out a certain part of us, and I think it takes a certain level of skill to like set the energy at the very beginning because I'll go on like a date or something and it will just not be there, you know?
Mhm.
And it's like in the past I'd like blame myself and all that stuff, but maybe it's just you're at an energy level and she's at an energy level and it just wasn't aligning in the right way. And that's okay. You can walk away from that with compassion and understanding. Like,
Totally. Yeah. But practicing and like figuring out what your baseline is, that's
mhm.
so powerful because then, yeah, the more you do practice, the stronger you get in your own vibration and your own energy. And
Mhm.
then you don't even have to consciously think about influencing the room
You
because
just
it'll just
become grounded.
happen.
Yeah.
Because authenticity is such a strong vibration when you know where you end and other people begin. That's pretty powerful stuff.
I mean, there are definitely people out there who they just have a presence to them and they didn't do anything about it. They're just born that way.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
Oh man. Yeah, we covered a lot of ground today. Thank you
Yeah.
so much for your time today. I
Yeah.
really appreciate you
Sure.
coming on.
I love talking to you. It's always a great time. So thanks for having me.